I think we're good, Jack. It's been a minute since I let anyone else in, so we could probably get started. And for those who are joining, we'll let them get caught up.
Fantastic. All right, well, I will get started with the slides. Hopefully everybody can see them. Let's go ahead and go to the first slide. No, I don't think it wants to. Let me try that again. Nope. Forgive me. Let's stop sharing and start again. I want to see the slides.
No, they are not up yet.
Did it kick me out?
You're there.
Yes, well. We will try again. If you fail, try again, right? How about now?
Yes, they are there.
I will gently go to presentation mode. All right, well, hopefully you can see our agenda for today. We're breaking this up into about 3 pieces. First, I want to welcome everyone for coming. Appreciate you all taking your Sunday afternoon, especially as we get close to the holidays when family comes to town. And I know this is a precious time for people. So we wish everyone a very relaxed holiday season this year, a Merry Christmas. And again, thank you for spending some time with us. We should take about 20 minutes for each section. We'll start with a little introduction, but then we'll look back over the last year or two just to show and share with everybody how we got to where we're at. That'll be maybe 20 minutes. We'll talk about what's to come in the future and spend another good maybe 15 to 20 minutes there. And then we're going to leave the last 20 minutes open for questions and answers. In the meantime, I would ask that if you have questions, currently you're on mute. So we'll open up the microphones at the end. But in the meantime, if you have questions, go ahead and enter them into the chat box. And we have a great staff. They'll be collecting those up and they'll give those to me. We'll start with the questions in the chat box first when we open it up for questions. All right, a little bit of background on MJA and who we are. I think we were a newly formed organization when we started these slides a year ago or so, but we've been in operation now for over 2 years. So I can't say that we're a newly formed organization, but our mission statement is down here below. We're advocating for change in the criminal justice system through a grassroots approach and direct lobbying with our legislators. The main focus, and we've been blessed this way, we can focus on this single topic, is to see some kind of good time system come back into to law here and be implemented as policy in Michigan Department of Corrections. And we're doing that just by networking with people and working first through the legislative approach, developing relationships with our lawmakers and other key stakeholders, other criminal justice reform organizations, and you, the people of the state, who really are the prime movers, I believe, in getting this job done. I've asked Mariah and others if they would like to join in with supporting me during the conversation, so they might pipe in as we go. I will pause from time to time to let everybody sneak in with their support for me. But here's the team behind the scenes. I just wanted to introduce everyone. Jessica is our vice president. Donna has stepped up as our treasurer and has supported us on the financial organization for a while now. We welcome Courtney, who just joined us recently as our secretary. Brenda has been a member at large since the very beginning, and Mary Cusack has also been with us for quite a while. Ryan has joined us more recently, I'd say, as he helps with the donor and finance committee work that I work on with him. Brandy is another member at large, and then Mariah is our executive director. So there's the team. Here's their email addresses. We'll make this presentation available afterwards, so you can always access this email list.
And that is good to note that it is being recorded. So this will be able to be viewed later, both on our website and on our socials.
So I think one significant event that I must talk about is the loss of our friend Danny Jones. When Michigan Justice Advocacy first got started, we met Danny as, and we will remember him always as the face of My Semi. He at that time shared with us how he was a former juvenile lifer who was given a second chance. And you could just see it in his face and hear it in his heart when he would speak about the opportunity to share and really drive change in the criminal justice system. He worked with us and welcomed us on board as another fighting member. We're really going to miss Danny, seeing him around the state, having his voice heard at rallies, and really being a gentle leader and just a helpful spirit. This is a picture of Danny when we had the National Lifer Association's rally back in October of 2021, and Jessica in the front there taking a picture after a rainy day in the Capitol, in front of the Capitol building. So God bless Danny. Okay, here's a short history of MJA. So when we started out, our goal was to try and reach all the lawmakers. And that's not a small task because there's 38 senators, 110 representatives, and every 2 years the deck gets shuffled and new people come in and old people leave. So we're in that phase right now of the legislature. They're changing the guard. Many people are staying, but there are new faces, and we're meeting with those new folks as they come in, even before they're seated. But in the past, we have reached out to every lawmaker's office. We've met with 29 senators or someone from their office, and 98 representatives or someone from their office. We even reached out to prosecutors across the state in all 83 of the counties, sheriffs. We started an internship program, and this goes back probably to the beginning of 2021. And since that time, we've had more than 200 interns come through and work with MJA through the years, semester by semester, and they've done a lot of the research and the data collection that goes into a lot of the material that we present. Our email newsletter is up to about 12,000 subscribers now, and we send out JPay updates. We're getting to the point where we're sending them out only about once every 2 months, I would say 6 to 8 weeks, but that list has grown to about 700 incarcerated citizens. And there's followers on social media. Now, I'm not the big social media person, so you're going to have to ask the other members of the team how that all works out. But I believe we're being streamed right now on Facebook, so glad to have everybody listening in. The first big lift that we really had to accomplish was getting some bill language put together so that we could hand this over to our legislators and have them introduce the policy that we wanted. So we were able to secure pro bono legal support from a Michigan-based attorney through Clancy Advisors. They're local here to the Ann Arbor area. And then a global firm, and that came about through one of the interns. It turns out their mom was part of the general counsel of a global firm out of New York, White and Case. So those two teams of law firms helped us draft that language, and we were done with that in 2021. But the process didn't end there. The drafting of bill languages is rather tedious. And what we wanted to do was make it very plain and easy to read. So the language that we got from our attorneys was just that. The policy points, which are shown here below, are laid out nice and clear. There's several different sentencing credit bills out there in the legislature. Ours is asking for a 30-day credit for every 30 days served without any major misconducts. What we wanted to do was address everyone, so we did not want any carve-outs in this policy. So anybody with a sentence that has a number, and so unfortunately, this limits us to those who are not serving life terms. The life term uh, problem is a real tough one, and we didn't want it to interfere with our ability to get this work done, but it is an important topic and it still does need to be addressed. The
Uh,
misconduct,
I do want to note that there are other organizations within the state that are addressing those long indeterminate sentencing and working on specific bills to address those individuals with life and life without parole. So that work is being done by the Sentencing Project and some other organizations here in Michigan. So it's not something we're ignoring. We're allowing others who that's their strength to really focus on that piece of legislation.
great, yes, thank you for clarifying. As we said, if you earned a misconduct, then you would not earn credit for that month. You couldn't lose more than the 1 month's worth of credit for the misconduct, but you wouldn't earn any credit that month. And we want this to be applied retroactively. So these are the clear and easy points that we laid out when we asked our lawyer friends to help us write this up. And what they came back with was a very simple 2-page proposal for the new law. It's written right here in front of you. Again, we can get you copies of this. It started out easy and we tried to keep it that way, but the process of having a lawmaker submit a bill requires that they submit it through the Legislative Services Bureau. So what has happened is we submitted this language to Senator Jeff Irwin early in 2021. He submitted it to the Legislative Services Bureau, and what they came back with is what's following here. Believe it or not, it's a 7-page document, and the way it works is anything new has to be stated here in clear and bold language. Anything that's being struck from the existing statute, as you can see, has strike through. So it came back 7 pages long from the 2-page document that we gave to Senator Irwin's office. And this is just the process. But the language here that I'm highlighting on page 7 is that language that we expect would be the anchor argument for why we're calling this retroactive, because we would ask that they go back and recalculate the early release date based on the credits and the history, the conduct of the individual serving time. So this is the bill in its form that's been submitted, and Senator Jeff Irwin introduced this back in September of 2021 as Senate Bill 649. This is the press release that went along with it. And again, I'm going quickly. We will be making all of this available, but I think Senator Irwin made some excellent arguments in his initial release of this bill. And we are still looking to him and the others who supported this bill in this legislative term to go ahead and introduce this again next legislative term. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So
I do want to highlight both the draft language that we had proposed to Senator Irwin's office and the language of the bill are available on our website. We did a town hall meeting previously back in June of 21 that highlighted that draft language. So that is on our blog on our website if you want to go back and compare that, what we submitted to them, what we got back in the LSB format, so that you can compare the two.
yes, thank you. There was an excellent presentation done at the time by the executive director, Mariah, along with the attorney, the local Michigan-based attorney, and that has been captured and saved in a YouTube video that we can make available. It's on our YouTube page, step by step, piece by piece, what each section of the written law or the written policy was meant to accomplish. So as I said, Senator Irwin introduced this in September of 2021, where it has been sitting now in Judiciary Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, since that time. We'll talk now more about the bills and how they move through. But let's first do a comparison, because our bill was not the only good time bill or sentencing credit bill that was out there this legislative session. This page shows us that there were 3, and now more recently, if you've been following the news, even still, 4 bills have been released. Senate Bill 649 is now paired with a House bill that was released. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but let's look across here. We have House Bill 4489 that was introduced. The lead sponsor was Kyra Bolden. This is a what we call a disciplinary credits bill, I would call it. The next page we'll talk a little bit more about the components of that bill, but it was supported by a large group of lawmakers, and that's not insignificant. The fact that there has become so much interest, if you look at this page, there's a total of 42 lawmakers in support of some form of a good time bill. And in our case, this is the first time in legislative history here in Michigan that the exact same bill has been introduced in both chambers, with the introduction of House Bill 6567 and its companion 6568. That's a identical duplicate to what we dropped in the Senate Bill 649. And we're calling this one our good time bill. The one in the middle is the bill that was released by Brana Colley, House Bill 4670. And that had some Republican support as well, but you can see there's a lot of Democrat support in most of these bills, including in the center, Tyrone Carter, as well as 4 Republicans. So we're looking at these lists, we're looking at these names, and we're targeting individuals that we want to obviously go back and revisit as we approach the next session. The comparison of these 3 bills, including our House bill on the right, are the productivity credits in the middle, disciplinary credits on the left, good time credits. And this is a nice little we're proposing. But again, let's not lose sight of the fact that there has been significant interest in this topic this past legislative session. This is unprecedented. I will back up to this previous page and point out that in previous years, there's only been one bill, and it's been introduced one bill per year, maybe going back to 2009, with one sponsor. In 2018, David LeGrand and Martin Howerlich introduced 5666, 2 sponsors. And then in 2020, again, Senator Jeff Irwin released 1242, I think, on our behalf. Again, 1 sponsor. But look what happened this past year, folks. Just absorb that for a minute. 42 lawmakers are interested in this topic. So that is fantastic. What other events did occur in the past for MJA and in the area of good time? Well, let's walk through them. Back in October, we started out in Flint with a rally on October 9th. This was organized mainly by our volunteers and led by key volunteer Bonnie Zabel. That story had been picked up and covered back at the time. There was some live coverage done by Fox 66, NBC 25. And that was the first time we met Rep. Amos O'Neill. He attended this, as well as the list of people you see down here and organizations. But Rep. Amos O'Neill showed up at that event. And I think it's significant because he recently introduced our bill on the House side as House Bill 5657 or 6567. So I view this as kind of maybe the genesis of that relationship, and it's only been growing since then. There are other organizations that were supporting that Flint Good Time rally, and I believe there's probably a lot of events that occurred and spun off from that. The other event that I want to pull up and remind everybody of is something we did in April of this past year. It was called a Legislative Lunch and Learn. And the focus of this was primarily to educate our lawmakers on the topic of truth in sentencing, and then make an argument as to why the good time policy is something that's been needed now after 2 years of experiencing the policy of truth in sentencing. We had 3 key speakers, Sophie Ordway, who created this graphic that you see here, and it's kind of a nice, easy to read graphic that walks you through the good time and disciplinary credits that had been in place back to 1857, and how they slowly have been evaporating until finally, by the end of the 90s, truth in sentencing took over, and that's what we've been living with since then. This presentation that was done for the lawmakers has also been captured on YouTube, and that's available on our YouTube channel as well. I think if we didn't talk about the good time ballot initiatives that have occurred, we would be overlooking an important component of this. So Michigan Justice Advocacy is taking what I call the legislative approach. We are trying to get our legislators to pass this law, but there's another way to get laws into place, and that is through the people. And the people would put a policy on paper and collect signatures for that. And you've probably heard all about these good time initiatives. Here's 2 significant ones that relate to good time that I want to bring up. The Michigan Prisoner Rehabilitation Credit Act started out in the 2019-2020 timeframe, and that's when I was first introduced to the idea. This language was drafted by Michael Thomas, out of the Saginaw facility, and then it was promoted by Amani Sawari and her organization, Sawari Media. They held some events in early January, but if everybody remembers, 2020 was the year of COVID, and that came along and really interfered with our ability to go out and collect signatures because we were busy collecting them, I'd say March and April, and then suddenly with the shutdown of the government saying let's not go out and stay inside to be safe, it impeded our ability to collect signatures. So Amani, with the help of Mike and the attorney Sarah Sahu, who is Clancy Advisors, they took this to court and they fought this in the Eastern District Court, which is a federal court. What they were seeking was some kind of relief, either give us more time to collect signatures or reduce the number of signatures that are required, or allow us to collect these signatures online. And all three of these arguments were rejected, unfortunately. So in the end, the MPRCA effort fell short of the needed number of signatures, and they end up losing their case in court. But out of that is what really spurred MJA to incorporate. So by September of 2020, MJA filed papers with the state of Michigan, and we decided we would pick this topic up of good time. More recently, Michigan United had gone out and initiated the same thing, a good time campaign. They took the language, mainly this was the language that was used in MPRCA, and held a number of events leading up to the kickoff of collecting signatures. They were holding training sessions. They got the language through the approval process, which is something that you need to do if you're going to do a ballot initiative. And they started that campaign in 2022, early 2022. But again, it is difficult. It is very difficult to collect enough signatures. And they also were not able to come up with the requisite number of signatures, because even though this is the minimum number, 347,000, you want to collect even more signatures than that, because the ballot process is going to require that you submit these signatures for review, and they check to verify their valid signatures. And they'll do a sample of 1,000 signatures and determine from that 1,000, if you had 90%, that means you're going to need more than the 347,000 valid signatures, because some 10% might be excluded, or whatever the validation process reveals. So unfortunately, this effort also ended up falling short. But this is also sending a message to everyone that this topic is interesting to people. It's something that's important to people, and many organizations are picking up on this and fighting the same battle with us. So we're thankful for MI United and their work. We're thankful for MPRCA and what they had done. All right, I'm going to take a little break here. And one last thing. If you want to learn more about this ballot initiative, we can make this reference document available to you. You can find this online, but it really explains what can be done with a ballot initiative, or other ways of changing the law or changing the Constitution. And I would let you just review that if you're interested. Any feedback on that point, team?
I think at this time we are good. Most of the questions that have popped up are related to the stuff you'll be bringing up in the future.
Okay. All right. How are we doing on time?
We are good.
All righty. Maybe I talked too fast. So let's look forward. First, let's talk a little bit about the election results and how that impacted what we see coming down the road. This is a list of the sponsors that supported us in the introduction of Senate Bill 649. And what I've done is, next to the sponsors who have won re-election, you'll see a green check mark. 8 of the 10 have are returning. That means they'll be in office in 2023 and 2024 legislative session. So you bet we'll be going back to these folks and building and continuing to build the support that we had gotten from them to begin with. I'm excited by that. And I think now that this topic is gaining more traction, I believe more names can be added to this list. The Senate Bill that should read 649, my mistake. But this bill, if we look at the geographic support from where it came, it really, the senators who signed up and sponsored it were mainly out of this Southeast Michigan district. You can see the check marks next to the district numbers. And by the way, these are the new district numbers that I'm using here. You can see It's the Detroit metro area, all the way out into the Washtenaw County area where Senator Jeff Irwin resides. Now, this was the big news if people were following, and probably why some of you are attending today. It really has helped prop this topic back up high in the media and the public's attention. Our lead sponsor in the House, Rep. Amos O'Neill, introduced House Bill 6567 and 6568 just this past week. Here's his press release, and he's added some good color in terms of numbers as to why we should be doing this. If you look at the average length of a sentence, how we're ranking #1 for length of time served. I mean, these are all, again, important points. I'm glad Rep. O'Neill picked up on this. Him and the other reps that have supported this recognize the importance of this topic. And we just really want to thank Rep. O'Neill. And notice the district he is from in Saginaw. The next page, oh, sorry. These are the sponsors that have signed up to the House bill. And 4 out of the 5 are coming back to return to office in the 2023-2024 session. The reason I believe that this number isn't maybe as large as it could have been is, frankly, the fact that Rep. O'Neill was able to get this bill introduced in this very tight lame duck session is remarkable in and of itself. Had he been given more time, I do believe this list would be far larger. So we really, again, hats off to the rep and all those who signed up. I think the real problem was really the compressed schedule for the legislators to get anything done this lame duck session since the election.
I do just want to highlight that. So this was introduced on Wednesday morning. That was the last day any bill was allowed to be introduced because Wednesday was the last day of session for this legislative year. The first day they had session for the lame duck after the election was on Tuesday. And Tuesday is when he received the physical paper bills, which are what are required to be introduced. So in less than 24 hours, he was able to contact his colleagues, get some names on there, and get it introduced in time for it to be recorded. If you were to look, there were only a handful of bills introduced this lame duck session. It was truly a lame duck. And so with that, it is really important that we had conversations with probably 70 to 80 representatives in the past week and a half or so, where we called their offices and let them know that it was coming. Unfortunately, he just didn't have time to collect all of their signatures before he had to submit it to the clerk to be recorded.
So again, you can guess who we're going to go back to as soon as the next legislative session starts. And that is all those supporters that we have found. And then we're going to try and persuade and cajole new supporters to come into the fold, because I believe the numbers are also important. I believe this will be a numbers game. And the more numbers that are calling for this, and that includes the citizens of the state, I think the more difficult it's going to be for the lawmakers to ignore this. These representatives came from a larger geographic area out of the state. I'm showing here with check marks as well, where they came from. And notice it's spread now throughout the lower half of Michigan. And this tells me that the topic and the support for this topic is spreading across the state. The word is getting out. It's unfortunately a slow process, but the word is slowly trickling out there and it's gaining wider support, in my opinion. This is kind of what this says. I noticed that the origins of support are still anchored to some of these larger urban areas around the state. And so that means there's still a lot of this state left that we need to persuade. And this is where the people come in to help. What we really need, we would love to identify those volunteer constituents from all, we'd like to get them from all 83 counties, to start developing the relationships that we need to talk to our lawmakers. We really want every county to have a voice from their county advocating for a good time law, because I think if enough people raise this topic up and we win this with numbers, it's going to be hard for these lawmakers to ignore the fact that the people of this state, the people they represent, the people they're supposed to be working for, are asking for this and asking for it in greater numbers. So that's what we're going to be pushing for as well, is getting more volunteer support, trying to organize those volunteers and really start to connect with their various representatives, lawmakers in their area. We've had a lot of questions about how does a bill become a law, and what is the status of this bill, and what happens now that the session has ended, and so I was going to walk through a simple example of how a bill becomes a law. And here's a simple graphic that breaks it down, and I'll talk about each piece of this. For instance, the introduction. So even before the bill is introduced, we've got to go find sponsors. We've gotten, the lead sponsor in Senator Jeff Irwin. We've gotten the lead sponsor in House Representative Amos O'Neill. And what's needed to get sponsors, again, it goes back to the people asking for this. So the volunteer constituents calling and asking their lawmakers to support a good time bill or a good time policy is number one. That's even before it gets introduced. This way we can obtain as much sponsorship, as many names as possible. And ideally, this is going to come from both parties. So then once it's introduced, then it goes into committee. And this is exactly what happened with Senate Bill 649. It went into the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee since September of 2021. Once it's in committee, here's what we need. And this is where we're, again, going to get these volunteers and people growing in numbers to start asking for a hearing from the chairman of that committee. Once the chairman finally puts it on the agenda, it will be important then to show up, ideally in person, if possible. And what you're doing is you're going to offer testimony in support of that. This can be in your own words. You're going to have 2 to 3 minutes. It's a very short amount of time, and it goes by very quickly if you've ever testified in front of one of these committees. It's hard to make all your points, but it's important to be there to make the points, to show them that the people care about this topic. If you can't be there in person, we'd ask then that you be either calling or writing to your lawmakers or that committee particularly, and we can give you the list of names of who's going to be on these committees when the time comes. The problem with trying to make this all happen is you're only notified with very short notice that your bill or this topic is going to come up. You might only be given even just a day's notice, and it's unfortunate that if you work like most of us do throughout the day, you're going to have a hard time suddenly dropping everything, rushing up to Lansing to testify in person. I understand that. But ideally, that is what we would need. And if not, at least offering testimony by phone call or written is going to be important.
And we will notify via our newsletter. So highly recommend that you sign up for our newsletter so that you can get those weekly updates regarding this. But as hearings occur or other opportunities to either email or call your lawmaker come up, we do share those with all of our regular subscribers. And there's various ways that can be done. And we'll talk more about that in a moment.
We'll get the word out. That's the key. We'll get the word out. So this past legislative session, I'm aware that only one of the bills, and this is significant too, one of the bills actually was, it made it through the committee and it was moved forward. I don't believe it moved any further on the floor, but once it's on the floor and they're going to take a vote, again, the volunteers contacting their representatives, their state senators and House of Representative reps, that they request that they support that bill and vote yes for it. But I don't believe any of the bills have gotten to the point where they have actually taken a vote. They got through committee, that's historic, but now we need to keep pushing. And the message I'm going to send is we need to do this in a consistent and a persistent manner. As more and more people become aware of this topic and more support grows for it, we cannot let up. We just need to keep pressuring and pressuring and pressuring these lawmakers until we're satisfied that they've heard us and they're going to take some kind of action. The worst thing we can do is just drop it and walk away. So it's a long process. We've already gone through a 2-year legislative session and it didn't happen yet. But I think in 2023 and 2024, with the makeup of this legislature, this is the best possible chance that we have to see this go forward. I'll go back to this topic of getting it through a committee and then out onto the floor. If it gets voted out of one of the chambers, then it would go to the other chamber. So if it gets into let's say the House of Representatives first, and it goes through the House of Representatives, once it's been passed out of the House, then it would go to the Senate, or vice versa. If a bill originates in the Senate and it gets approved out of the Senate, it's going to have to go through the House. It's going to have to go through both chambers. And at that point, we would ask that you would repeat the same kind of process if it's moving in the other chamber. Finally, if it gets through both chambers, both House and Senate agree, then what they're going to need is the governor to sign it, because the governor has the power of the pen of veto. So then this is where the volunteers would pivot and turn their attention to Governor Whitmer's office and request that she support this policy and turn it into a law. And that's the process.
So with all of that, as you can see, there's lots of opportunities for you to be calling and emailing. They do not all require you to come to Lansing and take time off of work or a drive. Calling and emailing, you think nobody hears it, nobody listens. We have talked to many senators and representatives who have said they receive hundreds of our emails throughout the year. They are quite familiar with MJA. They get it. So the more often and the more people doing it, the more annoying we become and the more they listen to us.
I like to say that we need to be pleasantly persistent. It started out when we were talking to our lawmakers 2 years ago, and we would say good time. No one seemed to understand, or a lot of people were unfamiliar. So we were educating the lawmakers. And I'll give you an example. I met with Senator Chang at an event downtown Detroit, and I walked up and introduced myself, and I said, "Hey, thanks for supporting Senate Bill 649." And she paused a minute and said, "I'm sorry, I see a lot of bill numbers all the time. What's Senate Bill 649 again?" And I said, "It's the good time policy." And she said, "Oh, of course, yes, that was easy. That policy, its time has come." So we know Senator Chang is a supporter, and the point is, we have gotten the message across. People now know, lawmakers now know what is good time. So we're being successful. We just got to keep it up.
And that actually leads right into our next slide.
Right. Okay. So here's the makeup of the Senate Judiciary Committee as it stood and stands, if you will. The list of names down on the bottom left are the current committee members. But because we're out of time, the legislative session is over, this whole deck gets shuffled. I've tried to indicate who's coming back and who's not with a green check or a red X. So 2 members of this committee are not coming back, but you can see many of them are. Now, I also want to point out that 2 of the members on this committee are sponsor and co-sponsor. The lead sponsor, Senator Jeff Irwin, sits on this committee. The co-sponsor, Senator Stephanie Chang, sits on this committee. And one of those 2 will become the next chairperson. I don't know that it's been announced yet, but it's pretty clear to me that we have, what would I say, a champion who's going to end up sitting in the place where they decide what goes on the agenda. So this whole picture of this committee will shuffle and change. It will switch because the Democrats now are in the majority. They will get to assign the committee members, and it'll be a majority Democratic committee with some Republican representation. You can see in this picture, it's a majority of Republicans with some Democrats in this picture. So that'll change because the makeup of the Senate and the House have changed. Likewise, the House Judiciary Committee, it actually lost a lot of members. You can see through the red X's that many of them were term limited, or they've moved to a different seat or a different chamber, or out of the Michigan Senate, the legislature altogether. Kyra Bolden, for instance, we're happy to see that she's moved into the Michigan Supreme Court. So what we believe is the two folks down at the bottom, Kara Hope or Kelly Breen, will probably become the next chairperson for this House Judiciary Committee. Now, why am I talking about these two committees? Because the criminal justice reform bills that we've been talking about primarily end up in one of these two committees. If it's a House bill, it's going to end up in the House committee. If it's a Senate bill like SB 649, it's going to end up in the Senate committee. Rep. Amos O'Neill's House Bill 656768 was referred to this House Judiciary Committee. But all that has ended now that the legislative session for 2021-2022 is over. So again, you can believe that these names on these lists are the people we intend to approach as we roll into the new session. So what do we want to do in 2023? We want to ramp up those lawmaker visits, and we'll start out the first event that we have on the ticket. You'll hear more about it is again another legislative lunch and learn slated for February 16th in Lansing. The idea here is there are new lawmakers coming into their seats. Some of them have not heard of these topics before, so we're starting over. But the good news is many of them already know. So
I do want to highlight in regards to the House, there are 57 new members on the House of Representatives, which means over half of them have never served before in the House of Representatives. So that is a huge number of individuals we want to make sure are educated on this topic and well informed, and we want to be the first ones to educate them on this topic. So that's why we are scheduling this so early in the session to get right in front of them quickly about this important topic.
Amen. Very, very true. So we'll be organizing those volunteers that rise up, and many of you have gone with us in the past. We'll be doing that again, and hopefully we'll be making the numbers larger. The focus of this legislative lunch and learn is going to be, it's an adjunct policy about fair chance hiring, the economics of hiring from this talent pool of returning citizens and those that have a felony conviction on their records. So we're going to try and talk about some of the ancillary or connected policies to good time, because we believe that what's probably going to happen is the good time policy is probably going to end up in a package of policies where we can probably gain that bipartisan support because we're talking about economics, we're talking about other needs and reasons why good time along with other policies should be enacted. And so the focus of our presentation on February 16th will be fair chance hiring and second chance hiring, basically.
And with that, it is key. The reason why we are bringing in people who support those type of policies is when good time passes, it is going to result in a large number of individuals eligible for parole and then released on parole in a very quick succession compared to how it currently works in the Department of Corrections. And so making sure that these re-entry policies that are key for supporting individuals and making sure that their re-entry is successful in the communities need to be strengthened. And we want both companies and businesses, but community nonprofits ready and prepared to welcome these individuals home with open arms and giving them the opportunities to be successful. And so knowing that the potential of 10,000 more people in the next few years after good time policy passes will be re-entering in communities is massive.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see the connection. And we'll do the education portion first, early in the session. Then, as we've now educated and we return and continue to visit with and connect with these lawmakers, that's when we're going to start rounding up the sponsors. And the likely time frame for a reintroduction of these bills is going to be in the March and April timeframe. The bills, because they've already been introduced, the language has already been written, they've already been through the Legislative Services Bureau process. That makes it very easy for these things to be reintroduced. No one has to go through and do the heavy lifting and hard work. The language exists and the bluebacks can be created, and we can get right to work and introduce these policies as bills early in the next session.
And we do want to highlight, usually the month of January, very few policies are introduced. Lawmakers usually aren't even sworn in till about the second week of January. And so with that, most committees don't even begin meeting until February or early March. So even if we ask someone to introduce early on, there's not necessarily a benefit. It's not going to have a committee hearing or other meetings. And on top of that, we will have not necessarily met with all of these new lawmakers yet, or have had this opportunity to have a lunch and learn. And so we want to really make sure we do all of this education and these meetings so that when the bill opportunity to sign up as a co-sponsor is available, they're ready and willing and able to do that. And that's why there's not a rush to make that happen. I know for many of us who have been waiting months, even years at this point in time, it seems very slow, and that's true. That's unfortunately the nature of politics, but this is how we can ensure the best chance of success and the most number of sponsors.
Mhm. Um, I'm probably not going to mention the name, but I know, Mariah, you've already asked certain offices to put this in their queue so that they will be ready to introduce, because I believe they're limited by the number of bills that a lawmaker can introduce per month. And if you don't get on that schedule soon, you end up on a list that gets pushed out till middle of 2023 and what have you. So we've already, I think, started that conversation and asked that they start queuing these up into their number of bills that they can release. Is that
Correct. We've had an offer from a representative to do that for us. So we are already on track to make all of this happen. These aren't hypothetical. We are publishing a February 16th date because we've already worked on arranging this stuff. We have these plans in place. Unfortunately, we can't tell you exactly February 16th at 2 p.m. We have a meeting with a specific rep, but we can tell you this is the day we will plan to be in Lansing.
Well, more than the day, I think this will be the week of effort, right? So if I'm going to take time off and somebody's going to try and join me and take time off, we can't get all the meetings in one day, right? We can't do it all on February 16th, but there's a good chance that we can organize things so that the week of February 13th, the in-person visits can be arranged and we can get some people mobilized, our volunteers and those that are interested in meeting face to face with their lawmakers. We can get those kinds of meetings scheduled, and I'll put together a spreadsheet because I'm an engineer and that's what we do. So we'll get it organized to the point where that whole week, I hope we're up there visiting lawmakers
And
every day.
as we get closer to those dates, we will release more information. We will do trainings like we have previously so people can understand who they're meeting with, and information to talk about, and give you all of that as we get closer. So again, signing up for our newsletters, and following us on social media, that'll allow you to really be aware and able to join us for those.
And the trainings will be calling, writing, and visiting our lawmakers. We'll also make it easy by creating an updated email letter that you can um, initiate from our website, and that will contact your lawmaker for you based on your address that you put in to the database. With that, I think we are nearly at the end, right? Oh, what do we need? Volunteers. And we're really going to focus on trying to organize these volunteers in such a way that we can really mobilize and have an impact on these lawmakers, hearing from more and more and more people about this topic.
So I see a couple questions, so I'll go through the ones that I have. One, when we have these meetings, we have ideally people who are in the senator or representative's district, meeting with them. If that's works for your schedule, it is more powerful. They feel like you have voted for them, even if you may not have voted for them. You have the power to vote for them one way or the other, so that is important to them. But there are times where schedule conflicts, we're not able to match your schedule with your senator or representative. So we will bring usually 3 to 4 people at most into a room, with a senator or representative to give personal conversation, and everyone can be involved. And again, this is a variety of people at different times throughout the day when we are up there. So as we get closer, we will let you know. In regards to bill language, so the way it is written for anyone who currently has a numerical sentence in Michigan. So for specific, you said convicted of murder, that could be a range of different charges. And so you would have to look at your specific number. It doesn't distinguish by MCLs. That is not how it's been written. That's not how it will be applied. And unfortunately, because of the nature of legislation and bills, there may always be challenges. And when I say challenges, I mean legal challenges where someone may decide to have a lawsuit or sue. The way it has been written and intended doesn't necessarily always apply to how it will be interpreted. So we can't predict the future necessarily that way. And I wouldn't want to make a promise that your specific loved one would be eligible for this specific policy exactly as written, because there are some interpretations that may come out. I see a question here about what organizations have we collaborated with for post incarceration resources. We are speaking to a variety of organizations all across the state. I know I've been on numerous calls in the past month or so, and there's a number of names here of people. So I wouldn't be able to name everyone, but if there's a specific organization you would like us to talk with, we would be more than happy to talk to them. So go ahead and send that information to us.
And
Um,
I'll add to that too, because my focus coming from business in the world of engineering, I'm focused on business leaders across the state, especially those who have already expressed or even put into motion programs and policies that hire returning citizens. So there's some sympathetic employers that I think if we get those business leaders in front of our representatives, they are now hearing not just from individuals, but they're hearing from powerful economic forces within the state. So that has been the focus that I've taken, and that's who. Those are some of the speakers that we'll be bringing on February 16th.
so there's a question here about how quickly could this pass? So the nature Jack stepped through that graphic that showed what it takes for a bill to become law. Unfortunately, our lawmakers are somewhat limited in their amount of time that they have committee meetings. And so in theory, if there's a committee hearing, it's usually once a week for a period of time, usually about 2 hours. So in regards to that, if it was introduced in March and then has a hearing and gets scheduled and then goes and gets voted and passed and heads to the other chamber and has a hearing and gets voted and gets passed and ends up in the governor's. The quickest some bills have passed are within 2 or 3 months after introduction, and that would require the whole effort of the entire state to be pushing this forward. More likely, it takes 6 to 9 months from when it's first introduced to when it's written and applied and put into place. Now, when it's written and applied and put into place, it will happen fairly quickly in the sense that the calculations begin right away. The Department of Corrections will begin their administrative work that needs to be done, and people would see changes to their earliest release date and max out date fairly quickly. Now, they are still appearing before the parole board. And so the parole board, that will be a whole nother administrative challenge because they only see so many so quickly at a time, and we can't necessarily expedite that process for them. But people would be having their parole hearings, they would be eligible for them, and there'll be a delay and backlog on that end, but it would be moving forward. And for many people, it could be a few years earlier than their original earliest release date. So that's why as soon as this starts moving, it's a snowball effect.
You know, there is some inside baseball to speak about. The speed at which a bill could turn into a law, I think, also depends to a large extent on how motivated the lawmakers are to see something happen on a particular topic. So there's the normal average process, and then I believe with certain laws, things happen so quickly it takes your breath away. And I can give examples of that, but I think it's going to be a matter of how interested and eager are these lawmakers to do this. And again, the pressure that we, the people, put on our lawmakers is vitally important to that process.
And I scrolled back up to questions that people threw in there at the beginning. Again, we are not distinguishing this bill by MCLs. It is literally anyone with a numerical sentence. That is how it has been written. So it could be violent, it could be drug offenders, it could be any type of individual crime. It is just based on if you were given a numerical sentence. For the recalculations, it would occur automatically based on an individual's entry date into the Department of Corrections custody, and you would be receiving 30 days credit for 30 days that you served without a class 1 misconduct. The reason the language is written there, we know some months have 31, some have 30. That is how Department of Correction currently calculates individuals' sentence information, and that's how their system is set up. So we are trying to make it as administratively easy for them to put into place, and so that's what we're following. And what that means is, say on January 12th, tomorrow, you received a class 1 misconduct for whatever reason. For the whole month of December, you would not receive your 30-day credit. But what you received in November is not being taken away or touched in any way, shape, or form. And starting January 1st, if the whole month of January you received no class 1 misconduct, you would receive your 30-day credit for that January period of time. This is very similar to what other states have. And so it was very easy for us to point to other states for comparison purposes in regards to data and information, so people could understand that. So that's how it has been put into place. I know someone asked, is there anything we could change in the languages or negotiations to maybe make it more likely to succeed? Those conversations may come up during hearings, and we will approach those when they do based on the advice of the attorneys who have helped us and based on the information we receive from lawmakers. But at this point in time, the language that we put forward, we think is the best possible solution for where Michigan is at right now.
I don't know what the time is. Do we have a plan to open up microphones? Or are we still working through the list of questions in the chat?
I see lots of questions still here, so we'll leave that there for a moment. So again, for those of you who are not Michigan based, you are welcome to call and reach out to lawmakers, especially those who are on the committees. But the voice being as powerful if you are not a voter or constituent for them is diminished. There's lots of support that we get from national organizations and other organizations in states outside of Michigan who are helping support us. So any voice, anything to amplify the message is welcome. But lawmakers listen to best to those who are voting or putting money in their pockets.
True.
So we will, again, as Jessica put down there, if you sign up for our newsletter, we will be starting to post once we have those committee assignments and who is on committees, who should be contacted. And we will give you emails and the phone numbers to reach out and call once we have those. At this point in time, because it is December and it's a lame duck, for those of you who don't know all the background, because there has been redistricting, all lawmakers are changing offices because they have new numbers. They have new staff because of the change from a Republican to Democratic led Senate and House, and it's Christmas and holiday season. So for right now, they're not doing this normal legislative work. So there's a lot of information we don't have until early January.
Yeah, I believe, what did our friends in the House tell us? They won't even be seated until January 11th or something like that.
Correct. And honestly, some of these new lawmakers, so the 57 freshmen who were just elected in November, they haven't even logged into their state emails yet. So even if we started emailing them, they wouldn't even see them. I don't know if there is any more specific questions. It looks like a lot of these are more general questions, but if there's any specific policy questions, please go ahead and put them in there. We would be more than happy to answer them. So The way it's intended, again, is it would start on the date they entered the Department of Custody, the Department of Corrections custody, and calculate forward. The Department of Corrections does keep track of people's misconducts. They can go back in time and say, your loved one entered January of 2015. They can look from 2015 to today to be able to calculate how much credit they have. I think at this time, let me see if I can change it. So if anyone has specific questions, but again, this has been recorded. We will be posting it in our newsletter and on social media within the next 24 hours. Take some time to download and disseminate the information. Again, the max, so it's 30 days for 30 days served. You could only have up to 50% reduction, and then you're eligible to see the parole board. MIJustice.org is our website, and you can search us Michigan Justice Advocacy on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. For those of you who are asking how quickly this bill could be voted on or implemented, it's the pace of the lawmakers. As soon as it's passed, it would definitely be able to get applied quickly, but it doesn't mean your loved one necessarily will be released right away. There is unfortunately administrative hurdles that will have to be worked through before people are released.
First step is to get this law passed, right?
Get it passed.
Get it passed. Once it's law, then we have something to start working from and arguing from. Then we can swing into action on the steps that need to be taken to implement this and turn it into policies.
Go ahead and raise your hand if you have specific questions. We can go ahead and get that. There will be new bill numbers come 2023-2024 session because they are reintroduced and they get assigned new numbers then. Alicia.
Hey, Jack. Hey, Mariah. It's Alicia.
Hey, good to hear you.
How are you guys?
Good.
So I just had a question in regard to, sorry, Jason's calling. So I know we're talking about House Bill right now, and I guess I was unaware until you guys mentioned it. So how likely is it that Jeff reintroduces the bill to the Senate? Like, is that a thing? Is that possible? Like, do people do that?
Yes, so we are actually having conversations with a couple offices to work through those details. There is benefits to introducing in one chamber, let them work it through that process, and then let it shift to the other chamber.
Okay.
So Senator Irwin and Senator Chang, like Bonnie put down below and we mentioned before, they're also working on the second look legislation along with the juvenile life without parole bills. And so there's discussion that we allow them to work those through the Senate while at the same time we're working good time through the House so that there's a balance going through both. So there's some political discussions being done. We had the introduction happen right now in both chambers because we knew it was the end of the year. There wasn't going to be a fight over who finishes it first.
Right.
But there is, Senator Irwin is still very much in support. We are trying to discuss with them what they believe politically will be the best option to move forward.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there was value in introducing this at this time, even though the session is over. It reignited the conversation in the public square, right? We've been contacted now by media. They want to do interviews. This is raising this topic up, and the lawmakers, they can't ignore the fact that this is still getting attention, even at the end of this session. So it just makes it that much easier when we go into the next session to say, okay, let's keep talking about this and get these bills out there into the cycle.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. And that it is causing a stir. And I will say from MCF and a lot of guys are like, really excited and trying to explain to them in my uneducated way of trying to figure it out myself. So I appreciate the session, and you guys know where to find me. So I'll be reaching out after the first of the year to jump on board. So I appreciate you guys so much.
Certainly.
Great.
And with that, we will be sending a JPay update sometime this week. We want to take all this information that we have here today in the town hall and fit it into a JPay for everybody. So it'll take us a little bit to organize to do that,
Yeah.
but they'll get a JPay update from us this week addressing many of those questions. Mary Ann, I see your hand is up.
Hi, yeah, I'm Mary Ann Gorman. I have been asking questions in the chat about LIDs, and I think, Mariah, you said this did not involve LIDs. I did already get an answer from Bonnie Zabel telling me about the other second look legislation. I'm just curious why this can't involve LIDs. For example, my guy has 60 to 90 years. Is he not taken care of under this legislation?
I cannot speak to the specifics of your case only because it depends on how your sentence was handed down by the judge. So if it was written as 60 to 90 days, 60 to
Years.
90 years as a numerical sentence, it would be possible. But if they were sentenced to life or life without parole, then it would not.
Okay, yeah, I know you can't address my guy, but just FYI, it was numerical.
Then
So he would be involved in this.
should be eligible for this if it was given a numerical sentence.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
And so the way we're also looking at the second look, Second Chance Act is that it's complementary, right? They are trying to attack the life and life without parole sentences. We are trying to cover all the other bases for the numerical sentences, and together they're not competing with one another. They're giving opportunities for both of these categories.
Right. Thank you.
Yes. And just to clarify, we did not address non-numerical sentences based on the advice of others who are working on other bills. It would be a very complicated legal language to apply a piece of policy to both. And so that is why there are slightly different policies being worked on for different types of sentencing.
Yeah, if you make something too big, trying to scoop up too much, it might become too complicated and people don't want to touch it simply because there's so much there. We tried to keep it simple. This was some advice we received from Michigan Legislative Liaison Kyle Kaminsky, for instance. We believe our bill is the simplest, but it's also, I believe, one of the most aggressive in terms of the amount of credit that we're trying to get for those serving time.
Ashley, I see your hand is raised. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Ashley Thomas. My loved one is currently incarcerated doing 30 to 60 for a second degree with no, they have no witnesses. They don't have any type of anything tying him to anything. He's been plastered all over the news. I just wanted to know if this is something that he would benefit from as well.
The numerical portion of this, as I understand, is what we are trying to address. No particular crime carved out. It's the numerical sentence that matters. And therefore, this policy should be applied, should be eligible. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
I don't see any other hands raised right now. So I don't know if there's any other outstanding questions, but if you do, go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you. I think that may be all, Jack. I don't see any new hands being raised. I see Kim here.
Oh. We'll leave the Q&A slide up.
Just a second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted, I think I seen it in the chat, but So I have a loved one and I'm not sure if he gets the JPay updates. So what would I need to do to get him on the list or have him do to get on that list?
Go ahead and email us, contact@mijustice.org. I think that was up there, and we will go through and update from all those emails. I've seen them popping in the email address during this meeting. So we'll go through and make sure before this next JPay update, everyone we receive today and tomorrow is added in for this next update.
Okay, and then will you just need his ID number? Is that what
Yeah,
you?
his 6-digit MDOC number, we can look him up from that, and then we can add him to our MJA JPay account.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I see India.
Yes, hello. I had a question. I know you guys talked about being able to follow up on things on what is it, a page or a website? I just wanted to know what page or website that was.
Yep, it's mijustice.org is our website. On the front page is our newsletter sign up, so you can put your email in there and you'll get a weekly email from us. They usually go up Monday morning early in the day, unless there's a holiday on a Monday, and then we push it till Tuesday. Nobody reads their email on a holiday. And so that's where we keep people pretty up to date in regards to any of these activities, whether it's emailing, visits to lawmakers, or other opportunities, including these Zoom webinars that we host.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anissa?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, my question is, how does the bill language impact someone who is currently serving 2 charges concurrently?
So it will apply to both of those charges, and it'll be calculated on each of them. And the earliest release dates will change for each of them, but they will still have to serve the earlier release date, if that makes sense.
What was that last part? It cut out. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if they're serving, let's say they're serving and their earliest release dates end up being when they've got all their credits, a 5 and a 6 year, they'll still have to serve that 6 year before they're eligible to see the parole board.
Well, they
Okay, and so
would be recalculated to half of potentially, if they obtained all the credit. So if a 5-year would be, 2.5 if they earned all their credit, and 6 would be cut in half to 3, but they'd still have to serve the 3 total, right? Does that make sense?
that does make sense. And do both the Senate and the House bills address a concurrent sentence the same way?
They do. Yes, they're identical language.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I see Deborah.
Hi guys, I'm
Hello.
Deborah. So I just heard of this. So I have 2 questions. If it passes, and so I'm assuming that they have to go in front of a parole board to actually get approved to get out, no matter what, right?
Correct. We are not removing the parole process at this time.
We're just trying to get people in front of the parole board sooner.
Okay, and then secondly, so I'm on board with you guys, but what is your, what do you guys say? What's your fight? Like if I go to my local senator, like, what am I saying to him? Like, what are you guys basing your fight for? Like, people deserve a second chance?
Well, no, this
Like-
is trying to recognize and reward and incentivize positive behavior. So if somebody is not getting misconducts, they've obviously figured out how to change their habits in such a way that they're complying with the law, right? They're complying with the policies of the facility. So this is truly an earned credit situation. They are doing things that they are working on their own rehabilitation in order to keep themselves out of trouble, and they've recognized they've done something wrong. So now they're trying to turn around and start doing things right. So it isn't just they're serving time and they're getting credit for serving time. It's hard to keep yourself out of trouble, given all the situations and scenarios that can occur inside a facility. So that alone has to be recognized. You know, somebody, let's say somebody's working on their sobriety, they're working on their anger management. These things will show up in the form of staying out of trouble.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, you guys. Thank you for all you do.
Oh, sure.
Certainly. So we don't know how that would affect boot camp eligibility. I don't know how that would work. That would be an administrative policy within the Department of Corrections. So I'm not sure how that would apply, unfortunately. And administratively, when this goes into effect, there will be a number of things that have to occur for the Department of Corrections in regards to processing individuals, classes, making sure people have their program that is being required at this point in time. So administratively, it would be affecting 20 to 30,000 individuals in some way, shape, or form, which is most of the system. And so there are a lot of things that will happen that we can't even think of today and answer all those questions. So something specific like this, I just don't have an answer for the boot camp.
Yeah, you can think about the category that people would fall into, right? If the law, when the law comes into effect and people start getting recalculated early release dates, those early release dates could be still in the future, depending on the math. They could be in the past now, and therefore somebody could be immediately eligible to see the parole board, which is going to create somewhat of a glut of people who need to be able to see a parole board. And then there could be a small category of people, I think, whose maximum date now has also been affected, and they should be eligible to be released immediately. Again, it depends on the math, but those are the three categories that people could fall into.
Mary C.
Yep, thanks. I just want to reiterate a couple of things, Marianne. You just touched a little bit on one, but I want to make sure people understand a couple of things. First of all, we handed off a piece of legislation, and that can get edited in all sorts of ways in both the Senate and the House before it finally gets a positive vote and signed by the governor. All of that's out of our control. So the bill that you see is what we would like to happen, but of course that could change. They could decide they don't want to make it retroactive. Things like that could happen, and it's out of our control. The second thing is how it gets administered, and that's what Mariah was just touching on. So once this bill passes, we have very little to no control over how the MDOC is going to actually implement the program. And while there would be a time limit on how much or how quickly they should implement, you can imagine that administratively it's a nightmare, and they will take as much time as they are allowed to implement. They're not going to be in a rush to implement. So I just want people to be realistic that, even if this passed in January, it's likely going to be a full 2 years before we start to see any action, because this will be a big lift for the DOC to implement. So it's all positive stuff, but I want people to be realistic in your expectations about timelines and about what may change before we see a final product.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Mary. And it's true, it will take time. Things of this nature are slow to happen. It's the nature of politics, but the louder our voices are pushing this and moving it forward, and the more voices there are, the quicker things will happen. And so there is a lot of support to move this forward. We just want to make sure all of you who are on the call, all of the individuals, everyone who has loved ones on the inside, those who are on the inside, all of these voices coming together and asking for this will make it happen. But we all have to come together. We all have to be asking for this, and we have to, as Jack said, persistent in asking again and again.
And I will leave with the key that I believe an educated population is also successful at getting this to happen, right? When you visit your lawmaker, when you speak to your lawmaker, having the power of knowledge of where things stand and what the specifics are and knowing some numbers, it's important that they recognize that you're a serious constituent and you really care about this and you're armed with information. So the purpose of our meetings like this is to educate the people of the state of Michigan on this topic. I think lawmakers will respect people who know what they're talking about.
I think on that note, we have covered most everything this evening. If you have more questions, feel free to email us at contact@mijustice, and we will have someone get back to you quickly.
Yes, and I just want to wrap it up with a big thank you for your attention and your interest in this topic. I am so glad so many people showed up, wanted to hear about this, want to learn more about this. That's fantastic. I think this should be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I truly believe it. Call me naive, call me Jimmy Stewart, but I really care about having the people get heard. I want our voices heard in Lansing, and you are the people that I want to bring with me. So let's go get them in 2023, shall we?
Have a wonderful holiday season and stay safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you all.